Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Now, after a career in the corporate world, Joyce Murray's experience as a volunteer in an all-female prison in Scotland would set the foundation for a new social enterprise. Joyce joins us now to tell us the story behind Grace Chocolates and how it is giving prisoners and their families a chance to make a fresh start. Joyce, we'll be discussing the inspiring story of Grace Chocolates and the benefits which it is delivering. But first, I'd like to hear about the early part of your own career.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. My career has been built in the private sector, in corporate world. I worked for financial services organisations, for law firms in the back end of things, so in business development, marketing, operations, that side of things, up until about 2012.
And what prompted you in 2012 to make the decision to leave the corporate world behind?
Coming up to the end of 2012, I decided that I had got to a stage in my career where I wanted to start a different path, expecting it to be the last change before retirement, or so I thought at the time. So I started looking around for other opportunities within a charity, and I moved to a charity in Edinburgh first of all, then headed back to Glasgow and worked for another charity for a period of time before starting this organisation.
So when you availed of a volunteering opportunity at a prison at Cornton Vale, which was Scotland's only women's prison at the time, what impact did this experience have on you?
It changed my world. It absolutely changed my world. I hadn't had any opportunity to engage with the justice sector, and the name Grace, Chocolates Changing Lives, comes because partly, there but for the grace of God go I, what I've realised was that we are all just one step away from this side of the wall or the other, that there's not a category of woman or person who ends up in prison, that it really could be any of us. And I think that was the biggest shock to me. I also realised how the impact of having a woman in prison is on the entire family, and decided that there was maybe something I could do to help and support the women as they move on with their journey.
I often hear it said that one bad decision is all it really takes for you to end up in prison. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's so easy that we haven't walked the walk, or I haven't walked the walk, where you come to that point in your life where you have to make a decision. And I've heard of stories where women have made the decision which has led them down a path, and as a result they have ended up in prison.
And what were the issues that you witnessed, both from a mental health, well-being and a family status perspective?
If the women weren't living with anxiety and depression before they went into the justice system, they certainly are by the time it comes out. It's a huge shock for anybody going into prison for the first time. The ripple effects for that throughout the entire family can be enormous. I heard of one situation where a little girl was telling us that she was coming to visit mummy at work because the family hadn't told her that mummy was actually in prison, because of the ripple effect that has. We've had situations where it's been a great grandmother that has taken responsibility for the children when mum goes into prison, rather than the children going into care. So can you imagine in your 70s taking on the responsibility of young children or a teenager? That's the kind of effect that it has on families, trying to get up to visiting time when they're trying to hold down a job, trying to find the money to travel. We all know that the cost of living is putting a pressure on so many people just now, but having to find that money to be able to keep that personal contact going and to have visits. So there's huge pressures that are put onto the families, and for the women themselves. 80% of women in the justice system are living with poor mental health, and then you add on the extra pressures of being in prison, and that puts an enormous pressure on everybody.
And in your opinion, Joyce, what more could the prison service do to alleviate some of those mental health issues?
I think that the Scottish Prison Service are doing, they've recently opened community custody units in Dundee and Glasgow, which is a new way of doing prison. It came out of the 2012 Angelini report, which was commissioned by the Scottish Government, and it looked at how the prison service is doing prison for women. And the community custody units are very centred, very person-centric. They're trauma-informed, so everything they're doing is recognising that women in the justice system are living with trauma, and it's a very different way. So I think that that's huge steps in moving forward and trying to support women in the justice system to help break that cycle of reoffending. Nobody wants the reoffending cycle, and these community custody units only opened last year, so it's still early days, but it'll be very interesting to see what difference this does have on the women.
And from your insights, were there multi-generational issues?
Sometimes there are. Sometimes that there can be children who are following in their parents' footsteps. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's the first time that there has been offending within the family. And that's at the Family Hub Centre where I was volunteering. That's when you saw the families like rabbits caught in the headlights, that they were in total shock that one of their family was now in the justice system and in prison. And it was about, as a volunteer, it was about supporting them to be able to come to terms with the fact that they did have somebody in prison and that they were carrying on with their lives and trying to support them to the best of their ability.
It was a trip to Italy in 2017 which provided you with the idea for the social enterprise Grace Chocolates.
It was. We were over in Italy and we had the opportunity to visit a friend, and we thought we might be going to visit their family. And in the guidebook it said, if you're going to visit a family, take along a gift of exquisitely wrapped chocolates. So we came back from the holiday and we were going round to friends for dinner, and I was looking for exquisitely wrapped chocolates and couldn't find any. So made a throwaway comment to my husband that I was going to make the chocolates myself and get the women to help me. And here we are 6 years later. That's exactly what we're doing.
It's a fabulous story. What reaction did you receive from the general public about the involvement of prisoners in the business?
There have been negative comments. There have been unusual comments like, do the women actually touch the chocolates, as if somehow being involved in the justice system is contagious. But largely, a huge percentage of people are totally supportive of everything that we're doing, and they want to support us because they recognise the need for everybody, the benefit to society for breaking that cycle of reoffending. So other than less than a handful, literally less than a handful of unusual or negative comments, the vast majority of people are hugely positive and want to support us however they can.
And when you engaged with the prison service about this initiative, what was their response?
They're very positive. We have been, one of our first ladies, in fact, the very first lady who came to work with us and to engage in our services came from Cornton Vale, which is the women's prison just on the edge of Stirling where we live and where we work. So the prison service were hugely supportive. The prison service for women in Scotland is undergoing huge changes just now, and hence the community custody units. So they have continued to be very supportive, and we are looking at opportunities to go back and support the women in the community custody units in the coming weeks and months.
Talk to us about these community custody units and how they actually work.
The community custody units are very different ways of doing prison. The women are still in prison. They are still under the rules and regulations of the prison system. But they are, they're not your typical cells. The women have rooms. It's the way people are doing things is very different, gender specific, and it's trauma informed. So it's not just about the actual physical environment where there are outdoor spaces, where there's plants which are sensory. So when the women brush past the lavender, it's a calming lavender smell that comes out. The colours that have been chosen are purposefully chosen to bring a calming effect for women who are living with trauma. But it's also the way that the prison officers are working with and dealing with the women. So they are very, very different. I'm not an expert on them, but anybody who goes along and visits your traditional prison and then visits the community custody units would immediately see the difference, and then the way that the women are treated within them is very different as well.
And Joyce, what process is involved in producing the exquisitely wrapped chocolates, and what are the logistics involved in manufacturing the product?
So we have a commercial kitchen. The kitchen is as any commercial environment would be, in that we have our food hygiene certificates. We've been inspected by the Environmental Health here in Scotland. So it is a fully functioning commercial kitchen. The difference is that we have women who have touched the justice system who come in and support us to make the chocolates, whether that be in the packaging or whether they're starting to train to learn to actually make the chocolates. We use high-end ingredients to produce high-end chocolates because that's very important to emphasise that we're always aiming higher, that we want exquisite, we want high quality, and that is part of the ethos of the organisation about supporting each other always to be the best we can be.
And did you encounter any funding challenges when you were trying to get Gray's Chocolates off the ground?
Funding's always a challenge, always a challenge. Our model has been right from day one that we want to generate as much income from the sale of chocolates to become self-supporting and rely less on funding. At the moment, we're sitting round about 55% of our income comes from the sale of chocolates, and we'd like to push that a bit higher. 100% of the income that's generated from the sale of chocolates is reinvested back into the organisation.
And what success have you enjoyed with the social enterprise to date?
We've enjoyed tremendous success because for me the success is from the women, and when they go on to find other employment, go into further education. When one woman came to me with her Open University application and we filled that out, that's success. Seeing photographs that the women will send us from other things that they're doing, or when they get back in touch and tell us what they've gone on to do, that's the successes. That's what really fills my heart and gets me up in the morning.
How has the social enterprise improved their mental health?
Two things that women in the justice system share: low self-esteem and low self-worth. And we work in a positive learning environment where every mistake is an opportunity for learning. If you think that the last time the women made a mistake and got caught, they ended up in the courts, then we have got huge hurdles to work with. But there is absolutely no doubt that the positive attitude that we have here, and that doesn't mean that we're all smiles and happy. We're a very honest environment, honest to say I'm sad, honest to cry, honest to laugh, and we do all of that together. And it's about building an environment where people can grow and heal, and that absolutely is good for everybody's mental health.
And Joyce, what are your plans for Gray's Chocolates over the coming years?
In the coming years, I would love to expand our services more. I would love to engage with more women, have them use the opportunities that are here, but also to deepen the engagement that we have. We already supply 4 services, and I would like to extend that. I would love to be able to offer the women access to counselling, for example, to help them deal with the trauma that they have lived with, which for many have been steps towards being in the justice system. I would also love to have the opportunity, and I'm hopefully going to be getting it, to have a look at accommodation, being able to provide fit-for-purpose accommodation for the women as well. So the next 5 to 10 years is very exciting, and growth, always growth.
And Joyce, finally, from your experience, what are the key ingredients for a successful social enterprise?
Never giving up. When you meet the challenges, when you meet the barriers, just keep going. We have an expression here at Gray's Chocolates. The answer is yes. Now what's the question? And that is so often in life, it's about being able to make it happen. Okay, we can't do it that way. What can we do to make it happen? Because it's going to happen. So how are we going to make it happen?
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Joyce Murray from Gray's Chocolates, and the success of this enterprise is a reminder of the social benefits which a business can deliver to a community.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.